Today's daf is daf nun vav, and we'll have to go back to the Mishnah for a second on daf nun dalid omer aleph on the bottom. Ubimei sifro, 2 lines up from the bottom of the Mishnah. Ubimei gomro. So this means that a person is huchlat as a mitzorah, and he has to sit outside the machna until he's healed from his saras. And these are called Yemei Gomro. And after he's Nisrapi Mitzaroso, he has to bring Shtei Tziporim, and he's got to be Megalech. And then, after the end of Yemei Gomro, then he returns to the Machna. Once he's back in the Machna, he has to sit outside his Ohel for 7 days until he brings his Karbanos. And those days are called Yemei Safro. And we're going to see that he requires a giluach at the end of Yemei Gomro and another giluach at the end of Yemei Safra. Now, in all these cases of Mitzorah, whether it's Yemei Safra or Yemei Gomro, the Mishnah establishes that Eina Nazir Megalech Alim. It's in the list of the Mishnah here on Daf Nun Daled. Then we fast forward to Daf Nun Hey, and about 5 lines up before the end of Daf Nun Hey Amud Aleph, we have Omer Rav Chizda Lo Shanu. Now, Rav Chizda is commenting on the following statement. The Mishnah tells us that Yemei Safro and Yemei Gomro Shel Mitzorah Einom Olim Leminyan Naziruso. They are not calculated and integrated into the malos, the number of days that he's obligated to be Mekayim his Nazirus. And again, just to go over this one more time, Yemei Gomro are the Yomim after he's Huchlat by the Kohen Latuma, and he's a Mitzorah Gomor. And at that point, he needs Giluach, and then he waits until Refuah, and then he is allowed to enter into the Machna, and then he becomes Yemei Safro, 7 days that he counts after he returns into the Machna, during which time he sits Chutz Lioholo. At the end, he's again a second time a Galech es Siaro at the end of Yemei Sifro. And this period of time, which is made up of 2 elements, Yemei Gomro and Yemei Sifro, is not counted in the calculation of Yemei's Nazirus to be mashlim his Nazirus. Amar Rav Chizda lo shanu ela b'Nazirus muetes, aval b'Nazirus meruba mislak nami sulkinle. The Mishnah, which says that Yemei Gomro and Yemei Safra are not calculated in the days of Nazirus, that's only in a Nazirus of Shloshim Yom, which is called Nazirus Muetas. So he was makabel on himself Nazirus of Shloshim Yom, then he became a Mitzorah, and the Kohen is going to be Megalechim at the end of number 1, Yemei Gomro, and number 2 at the end of Yemei Sifra. So on the day of Shloshim, from the moment he began his Nazirus, he never had what's called Gidul Si'aro of Pera, which is Shloshim Yom. And therefore, he cannot be Megalech. So that's the case of Shloshim Yom of Nazirus Muetas. And Tosfos points out that the same din would apply regarding Tiglachas Nazirus, that the Seir of Shloshim Yom is the minimum amount of Gidul Seir, and here he doesn't have 30 days left from his Tiglachas. And therefore, the Yemei Saraso Einom Olimlo. And he has to start counting from the beginning in order to get the 30 days of Gidul Seir. Not so in the case of Nazirus Meruba. Let's say he accepted upon himself a Nazirus of 60 days, of 100 days. So then, since after all his Giluach for both Yemei Gomro and Yemei Sifro, he still will have a 30-day period of time to be Megadol Seir, then the Yemei Tzaras are Olim Lo Leminyan Yemei Nazirus. That's the Shita of Rav Chizda, which is coming under attack. And before we start today's daf on Nun Vav, we'll take a look at the last two lines on daf Nun Hey Amid Beis that start with Masiv Rami Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama is going to raise an objection to Rav Chizda. And his objection is based on a Mishnah later on Daf Nun Tes Amid Beis, in the case of a person who accepted upon himself Nazirus of Shloshim Yom, and then immediately on the very first day of his Nazirus, he had two Sfeikos. One suffix was Safek Tameh. And what could be a case of a Safek Tameh? So that's a simple matter. And that is, he went down a road and there was a dead body there. He didn't know whether he went down that road or this road. So that's a Safek Tameh. Safek Tameh Mes. Now, the law of a Safek Tameh Mes is that after his Tara, he needs a Giluach and he has to start counting his Naziris from the beginning. Now he has another Safek. Umuchlat b'Safek. He has a Safek where he's a Mitzorah Muchlat. And as we discussed yesterday, there are a number of different possible scenarios in which you could have a Safek Muchlat. We'll just mention one of them, which is mentioned in the Yerushalmi, that the Kohen was machlit one of two people, and he doesn't remember which of the two he was machlit. And we don't say Uki Gavra b'Cheskes Tara because the Safek is perhaps he already had a Cheskas Tuma with regard to the Kohen's process of being machlit. So now he doesn't know if he's a Mitzorah Muchlat. And a Mitzorah Muchlat, when he finally goes through the process of Tara, he's going to have to be Megaleach. And during the time period in which he is a Safek Nazir Tar or Safek Nazir Tameh, he's also a Safek Mitzorah. And now we start today's daf. So what is the halacha? Says the Mishnah later on daf, the Gemara quotes the Mishnah on daf Nun Vav Amid Aleph, Ochel b'kodshim li'achar shishim yom. So this is where we sort of got stuck at the end of yesterday's shir. Let's see if today we could have a little bit more success. So we're going to talk about the korbanos, but just before we get to the korbanos, he's going to count 30 days. And at the end of that 30-day period, he'll be megaleach for one of three reasons. Number one, he might be a Nazir Tar. And therefore, a Nazir Tar, when he's Messiah his Nazirus, requires Giluach after he brings his korbanos. He might be a Nazir Tameh, and he needs a Giluach because at the end of his Tumah period, he needs a Giluach in order to begin his Nazirus Tara. He also might be a Mitzorah, and a Mitzorah at the end of Yemei Gomro requires Tiglachas Rishona. So now, at the end of this 30-day period, he's going to be Megaleach for one of three reasons. Then he'll bring his korbanos. Now, there's a whole list of korbanos that he has to bring. He's got to bring Tzipore Mitzorah, because he's a Safek Mitzorah. And he's also a Safek Nazir Tameh, so he has to bring what's called a Chatas Ha'of Haba'al HaSafek. He also has to bring an Olas Behema, because he's a Safek Nazir Tar. And at the end of his Tara, he needs to bring a Olas Behema. Now he's going to have to make it tonight. If he's not a Nazir Tameh, I'm sorry, if he's not a Nazir Tar, then this Ola, which is an Olas Behema, should be an Olas Nedava. Now, if he doesn't bring a Chatas and a Shlomim, okay, we'll have to see exactly why. Chatas is Ein Abab and Nedava. Shemechuyev mitzad yoso Nazir Tar, right? A Nazir Tar has to bring 3 karbanos, not just an Ola, he has to bring also a Chatas and a Shlomim, but he's not sure whether he's in fact a Nazir Tar, so it's a chash of Chulun Bazara, and he cannot make a Tanai in the case of a Chatas. However, on the tzad that he's a Nazir Tar, he should be able to bring a Karban Shlomim, because the Karban Shlomim is Ba bin Adava. However, we're going to say that B'di'evet he doesn't have to bring a Karban Shlomim, because if he was Megalech on one of his Karbanos, and in this case he was certainly Megalech on the Olas Behema, because an Olas Behema he can make a Tanai that it's an Olas Nedava, so he can then do his Tiglachas based on one of his Karbanos, one of 3. And that's what he did. He brought the Olas Behema, and then he has a Tiglachas. Now, as far as Olas Ha'of, because he might be a Nazir Tameh, so we said that he could bring the Olas Ha'of because an Olas Ha'of is Baal HaSafek. However, there are other Rishonim who reject it. Okay, so that's as far as Karbanosif. Okay, now we have to understand what happens. He's at the end of his 30-day period. We said he needs Giluach for 3 different Sveikos. Now he begins to count an additional 30 days in order to achieve the number 60. Why is that? So it says here that he might be a Nazir Tar. So I'm going to accept that at face value now. On the tzad that he's a Nazir Tar, he needs another 30 days. And it's very strange because we're talking about a case of a Nazir who is makabel on himself shloshim yom. And he counted already 30 days. So if he's a Nazir Tar, why does he need another 30 days? Now, I saw something in one of the other Gemaras about this, but in any event, it would seem that the reason why he needs another 30 days is because since he was a Safek Mitzora Muchlat, he was required a Tiglachas as a Mitzora Muchlat. And he needs another Tiglachas to be Messiah his Nazirus of Tara. And for that, he's going to have to count another 30 days. Now, there's a whole long discussion here in Tosas about why the Tiglachas is not generated by Nazirus of Tumah, which is an interesting question. Okay, so fine. Now he adds another 30 days. And at the end of the 60 days, he brings his karbanos. Now, what does it mean he brings his karbanos? He brought his karbanos already at the end of the 30-day period. He says he has to bring an olas behema mitzad heyoso sofek nazir tar. Today sheyuchal legaleach. And he makes a t'nai that ola, in effect, in event that he's not a nazir tar, should be an olas nedava. The day after his tiglachas, he brings a chatas ha'of, habala safed, because he might be a mitzora. Now, he's allowed to eat his kachim, but he's not allowed to drink wine or be mitami l'meisen. because he still has another suffix. He needs 2 tiglachas, biyoso Nazir. I'm sorry, biyoso Mitzora, I meant to say. So he needs a double tiglachas as a Mitzora, and now he's a Nazir. So Shosei Yain Umitami Lemesim Liachar Mea V'Yesrim Yom. We're going to have to add another 60 days. We need another 30 days, which will bring him up to the number 90 from the time that he was Mekabel as Nazirus. But he's going to be Megaleach at the end of that period, the 3rd period of Shloshim Yom, for one of 2 reasons. Either because of Nazirus Tahara or because of Nazirus Tumah. And once again, he has to bring his Karbonos. But he still has another suffix that maybe the 2 first tiglachos were tiglachos of a Mitzorah Muchlat. The 3rd one might have been a tiglachas Nazir Tameh. So he still doesn't have a clear-cut, definite tiglachas as a Nazir Tar. So he's going to need another 30 days of Nazirus of Tara, at the end of which he brings his Karbonos, and only then he can do his tiglachas, which would be matir him in the Isurei Nazir. V'tani Allah, on this Mishnah, which is later on Daf Nun Tes, we have a brisa. Amedvar Mamurim. When do we say that after the 60-day period he's allowed to eat kodshim? But as far as yayin and tumas mesim, we have to delay it until after 120 days. That's only been Nazirus mu'etes. His original Kabbalas Nazirus was for 30 days. Avol ben Nazirus bas shana, if he took upon himself a Nazirus for a year's time, and at the beginning of that year he had a suffix, maybe he was nitma b'mes, and he had a suffix, maybe he became a Mitzorah Muchlat. Is ochel b'kodshim liachar shteishon. We have to add another full year. And only at the end of that 2nd year, he could be megaleach for one of 2 possible reasons. Either because of Nazirus Tahara, or because of Nazirus Tumah. Oh, we could add a 3rd reason, right? He might have to require a tiglachas rishon of Nazir. So that's at the end of the 1st year. Now he has to go back and count a 2nd year, and at the end of the 2nd year he's megaleach, either because of Nazirus Tara or because of tiglachas shniya shel Mitzorah. And only then is he mutal lechel b'kodshim. But nevertheless, he's still also b'shtiyas yain olitami lemesim, because we still have an outstanding suffix. Maybe the 2 tiglachos were as a result of his Mitzorah. And therefore there's no tiglachas of a Nazir, and he needs now another tiglachas of a Nazir to be matir him with shtiyas yain and tumas mesim. And therefore, Shosa Yain Umitami Lemesim Leachar Arba Shanim. He's going to have to wait 4 years, like we said in the case of Nazirus Mu'etes. He's only mutar Liviyayin after 120 days, until we know for sure that he's Mekayim is Nazirus Petara. Here also, since he took upon himself a Nazirus of Shana Achas, therefore, he has to be careful and abstain from yayin and tumah for another 2 years in order to cover all the sveikas. Okay, fine. So that's the Mishnah and the Brisa. What's Rabbi Bar Choma's kasha on Rav Chizda? According to you, Rav Chizda, salkin leyome. In a case of Nazir's Meruba, Rav Chizda was of the opinion that we can integrate the days of Mitzorah Muchlat into the minyan of Nazirus Tahara. And the reason for that is that even after his tiglachas of Mitzorah, he still will have 30 days of Gidul Se'ar, is Tizgelei B'shalosh Shonim U'shloshim Yom. All right, this is a real cheshbon. How does the Gemara come up with Ramon Barchama with 3 years and 30 days in order to be materim b'yayin and tumas mason? He needs 2 years because he's a safek mitzorah. That means that he brought an olas behema for a safek nazitar. He made a t'nai that if this is not because of his nazirus of Tara, then it should be an olas nedava. He brings a chatos ha'of because of a safek nazir tameh. So now we're up to 2 years. Now he needs another 30 days based on a mimanavshach. Let's see if we can get this mimanavshach. If he's a nazir tar, then according to Rav Chizda, since he was makabel on himself a nazirus meruba of a full year, therefore his days of tzaras are integrated into the year of nazirus. So the second year, which he's observing because he's a safek mitzorah, those days can now be ololol naziruso. And since at the end of the second year he's going to do a giluach for his tzaras, now he needs 30 days of gidul pera. So he'll have to wait another 30 days of gidul se'ar in order to be mgalech a third time for his nazirus. Now, if he's a nazir tameh and he wasn't makayim his nazirus b'tara, then all he needs is those 30 days in order to be mitayr himself. However, since he's still in a safek, maybe he's a mitzorah muchlat, and therefore he's tameh, he needs to be megaleach because of safek mitzorah. And now he's going to have to add another year, a third year. How do we jack it up to 3 years? He needs a third year because he might be a mitzorah muchlat. Now, at the same time, he might be tameh, and he's being megalech because of Nazir Muchlan and also because of Tumah. He's going to now need another year to be Mekayim as Nazirus of Tara. But the Mishnah says explicitly that he needs 4 years, which means that the days of his tzaras are not Olol Aminyan Naziruso. Even in this case of Nazirus Meruba, and that's against Rav Chizda. And now we have Rav Ashi who asks another kasha on Rav Chizda. Ainli El Yemei Tuba. This is a Sifri. Shein Olam Lo Min Aminyan. So if a Nazir becomes Tameh, the pasuk says Vayom Rishonim Yiplu, and his Tum is Sosa Yemei Naziruso. All of the Nazirs that he was Moneh while he was tar. And how much more so? Lo yala lemin yono. It's yom rishon yiplu. By contrast, you make chiluto, which means he became a mitzorah muchlat during his days of Nazirus. Minayin, how do we know that those days of Mitzorah Muchlat are not Olim Lo Leminyan Yemei Naziruso? Says the Sifri V'dinu. Tosas learns V'dinu means it's a Bamematzinu. Just like a Nazir at the end of his Yemei Tumah, he's Megaleach and he brings his Karban Asham. So too, Yemei Chiluto, during the days in which he's a Mitzorah Muchlat, at the end of his process of ripui, he's megaleach and brings a korban osha mitzorah. So we see a certain similarity between the dinim of Tumah and the dinim of Mitzorah. Tumah meaning Tumas Mes. Is Ma Yemei Tumaso. If a Nazir becomes Tumah in Olam Lo Min HaMinyan, the days of his Tumah are not incorporated to the Minyan to be Ola for his Nazirus. Is Af Yemei Chiluto, so too during the days of a Mitzorah Muchlat, Ein Olam Lo Min HaMinyan. So that's against Rav Chizda. And the Brisa continues, the Sifri continues. Lo. So the Sifri is kind of vacillating back and forth, like a typical Brisa. We cannot equate Yemei Chiluto of a Mitzorah to Yemei Tumaso of Tumas Mes. Ima Marta Yemei Tumaso. I understand why you made Tumah, not Olam, and you made Nazirus, she came Mevatel Benes HaKodim. Since the halacha is Yom Rishon Yitlu, and it's Soser, all the days that he observed his Nazirus before he became contracted Tumah, is certainly those days of Tumah cannot be Olam, and you made Nazirus. But Tomar, should you therefore apply that yardstick to Yemei Chiluto, that the days of Mitzorah should not be Olam Minyan Nazirus, she'ein mevatel benes hakodmin. We know for sure that when he contracted Tumas Tzaras, it's not mevatel his status as a Nazir. And this we saw back on Daf Mem Gimel, derived from the pasuk Vayom Rishonim Yiplu Ki Tomei Timei Nizro. Tumas Soseres v'ein yayin v'tiglachas sosrin. And Eino Soser al hechloto, meaning because he became a Mitzorah Muchla. So now the Tana comes back and he introduces a Kal V'chomer. Until now we had opinion on. Omarta Kal V'chomer Uman Nazir Bekever. If a person accepted upon himself Nazirus while he was in a Beis HaKvaros, Shasi Oro Roy L'Tiglachas Nazirus. He doesn't have to be Megalech Sa'oro as a Nazir Tomei until he begins to be Noeg his Nazirus Betara. So he leaves it Shloshim Yom and he's Megalcho. He does Tiglachas like a Nazir Torah. So again, he's going to have to undergo a process of Tara, and then he could begin his Nazirus Tara after he has Hazah, B'Shlishi, B'Shvi. And in such a case, he doesn't bring a carbon on his tumah. I forgot where we learned this. I think it was back on Daf. Don't remember what Daf it was on. Maybe it's Zion. Anyway, even so, Ein Olam Lo Min HaMinyan. The days that he is inside the Beis HaKvaros are not integrated into the Minyan Nazirus of Tara. And when he leaves the Beis HaKvaros, then and only then can he begin counting the Shloshim Yom of his Nazirus. What's the Kal V'chomer now? Yemei Chiluto she'en sa'ar roy l'tiglachas Nazirus. In other words, if he became a Mitzorah, a Muchlat, he has to do a Giluach because of his Tzaras, and therefore he's not considered Se'ar Haroy l'tiglachas Nazirus. Is lo kolshken, certainly lo yalu leminyan yemei naziruso. So in the case of a Nazir, bekever, sa'aro royal tiglachas nazirus, He doesn't need Giluach as a Nazir Tameh before he begins his Nazirus of Tara. And yet, Eino Olmo, how much more so in the case of Yemei Chiluto, where Ein Tza'arai L'Tiglachas Nazirus, because he needs Giluach as a Tzaras, and he has to bring a carbon for his Tumas Tzaras, is Lo Kolshkein, certainly his days of Tzaras cannot be Olaminyan Naziruso. So at this point, we've come to the conclusion that Yemei Chiluto are not Olaminyan Nazirus. Now he needs another 7 days, which is called Yemei Safra, during which time he's in the Machna, but he's outside of his own oil. How do we know that those 7 days of Yemei Safra are not Olaminyan Nazirus? Ainly El Yemei Chiluto, Yemei Safra Minayin. How do we know the additional 7 days of Yemei Safra are not Olaminyan Nazirus? Again, this is all part of the Sifri that we began a while ago. Vidinu. And again, the words vidinu mean a bamematzinu.